Hey, and welcome back to the Monster Mod Customs channel. Today, since it's a fairly nice day out here, we're going to be working on Banshee project over here. Goal today is I want to get all the gas out of the gas tank for starters. I was hoping I could use a transfer pump for that, but the transfer pump is just not meant for gasoline. So I'm going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. We'll see how that goes, especially with how low it is to the ground. Maybe I'll just do fuel pump doesn't work. I don't know yet. We'll see if it works. If it does, that's fine. Maybe I'll bring out the little hand pump that I use for ATF. We'll see if that works, how long it'll last against gasoline at least. But that's the main goal. Otherwise, I'm going to be probably over here grinding out some components and getting them ready for powder coating. Getting myself set up. Also, maybe thinking about what to do with the shocks. Since I'm going to end up lowering this vehicle in the end, I might just get a shock adapter kit, which is something you can get for these cars where you get an aluminum sleeve with the screw threads on it, so it'll turn it into a coilover. You take the aluminum sleeve, it goes on here, you basically cut this whole ring off of here, so it slides down to the top of the mounting plate here. And then you can just put a coilover spring over top of it and have an adjustable suspension. And that seems like the easiest way to do an adjustable, or at least to lower it, and especially because it'll give me a better response, especially for the good news on this car. I think I found an engine transplant for it. There's somebody in Virginia who's selling a 3.8 liter that had the supercharger model, so it has all the compression that I want, the better numbers for forced air, and it comes with some bonus parts, things like that. It's broken all the way down to almost the block, but it's supposed to be very low mileage. We'll see where that goes. If it turns out to be good and a deal, I'll grab it, and then I'll have an engine to swap into this car, which means I can start considering how I'm going to remove this engine from here. For these cars, it's not too complicated. Whoop, don't go anywhere. For these cars, it's not too complicated. Basically, that entire lower section where the wheel is at, down there, all that's attached at a point right here and a point up there, and that entire subframe will come out with the suspension. Granted, I have to unbolt the top of the strut here, but it'll all come out, and then I'll just have to lift the whole car up around it and drag it out with that. So it should be fairly easy in that way, but I also still have to go through the whole of the engine and find out exactly what needs to be done with it. Since I'm going to be going with forced air to start with, I might just upgrade some components since it's already broken down. Maybe I shouldn't have to, but if I'm going 400 to 450 horsepower, it probably wouldn't hurt to upgrade the pistons, rings, and maybe the conrods. But I will have to work on the top end on the valve train. But that's another nice thing, is that this engine comes with some valve train components for a boosted setup. So that's pretty nice too. I've got a lot of work to do there, but for now, we'll just start on seeing if I can get this fuel transfer to go. And you might see me moving around, doing stuff like this. I like to listen to music when I'm working on stuff. So if I'm moving in a weird way or making weird hand gestures, it's just me dancing to the music, or singing maybe. Little side note, this is a mechanism that's inside of the tank, so I think I might be able to use this old Jeep pump here as a new one, so now I don't need to buy another one, which is pretty nice. I might even be able to use this. Well, no, I don't have a way to attach anything to that. But I think I have an extra fuel pump in here that I'm going to try to just hook up with battery power, maybe a 12-volt battery I'll pull out of the Fiero or something. And see if I can't pump that stuff out, because this little transfer pump just is not working. It's not getting enough draw, or it's just not coming through. And I'd rather not do it all just by mouth transfer. Gasoline doesn't taste good, in case you don't know. I'm going to be taking the return line off and seeing if I can't pull from there better. I think I'm being prevented from really pulling anything by the pump itself. The pump is in line, and I think it's just stopping me from getting any kind of real pressure going through these lines. When I had that little pump going with the battery attached to it, it was pumping, but when I removed the inside, it had so much suction on it, on that end. So there's something in there it's either blocked up, or it is the pump that's preventing any kind of flow from coming through it without that pump being operational. So I'm going to pull off the return line and see if I can't pump through there, since it should pretty much be at the same level, and then we'll see if that works. Alright, that's that for the gas, thankfully. It was pretty close to a full tank. These tanks are 11 gallons or somewhere around 12 gallons. And I pulled 10 and a half, maybe 11 gallons out of there. There's even still some left in there because not only is the car tilted forward a bit, also that return line doesn't get all the way down to the bottom. But I think with the last gallon or so, that's going to be a lot lighter than 10 gallons in that tank. That'll make it way easier for me to drop it later. Now I'm just going to be working on prepping parts for paint and or powder coat. So I'm just going to be mulling around this area for a bit. Alright, that's going to be all for today. I haven't really done a whole lot today. Got some bushings out since I'll be replacing all of the bushings, and there was some corrosion on some of these parts, so I'll be replacing most of the bushing related components. A lot of these, as you can see with this guy here, are pretty wallowed out. Some of them, like this, you can see the corrosion around it. Well, you might be able to see the corrosion around the edges. You can see how rough that looks. And then some of them ballooned out, which is really not good. So I've got a lot of suspension components. I have a whole kit over here full of new bushings for all this stuff. So I'll do that eventually, but mostly I'm just taking the rust off of them, taking the paint, well, what paint I can off them. What little corrosion is on them will come off. And then I'll think about putting it back together after I decide what I want to do with the strut here. Otherwise, got the tank pretty much emptied. Pretty fortunate on that front since, as I said before, there's just about 10 gallons out of there, so that'll make it a lot easier. Just a quick update for the Banshee project. I do have something really cool that I found online and went out to purchase, and it ended up being a much better purchase than I thought was possible for it. So, as you've probably seen in the other video, I'm planning on swapping the engine out of this car. It started with the 2.8. I was looking to go to the 3.8 supercharged motor, because it has the compression ratio I'm looking for, and I can swap that over to a turbo and get the horsepower range I'm looking for, which is somewhere around the 400 to 450s area. So I found one online in Virginia. It's about 5 hours away, so it took a minute to get to it. And it was 3 pictures of it. You couldn't really tell what was going on. People tend to over-embellish their ads, so where it says, hey, it's a low-mile engine, there's nothing to prove that. So I have no way of knowing if it's actually low miles, if it functions as intended. It still had one cylinder head sitting on the top of it. So I was a little concerned about that, because my thought was, oh, he took that one off, saw there was something wrong, put it back on so you can't see anything in the pictures. I'm glad to say I was wrong. I went out there, the guy knew exactly what I was going to be looking for. He had the cylinder head off, he had a wrench on it so that we could see it rotate, we could see the pistons come up and down. It was perfect. The guy was a technician. He knew what he would look for in these things, so he knew what probably I was going to look for in it. And I got to look at all this stuff, and man, the engine looks really clean. I'll show you here in a second. It looks like it has the low miles that he's talking about. The cylinder walls are still almost a mirror finish. The piston heads have pretty much no carbon buildup on them. But outside of that, it came with a boatload of parts. He was planning on doing a turbo build as well, so it all kind of shakes out because he had some of the things I would be looking for. Plus I ended up with a handful of other extra pieces. So let me show you. This is my workbench right now. It's a little packed. So what we've have here is we have a set of cylinder heads. He's already replaced the valve seals. But he says that these cylinder heads had a bad valve job, so they don't fit together that well. I could take these in and get them machined. I'm not sure what I want to do, mostly because this also came with the original cylinder heads that came with the supercharger setup. So I may just take these out, and I mean, you could see the top end's got some just debris from it sitting in his garage for a while. And you can see some just general dust buildup, but I mean, down in there, the galleys and everything look very, very clean. So either it was taken care of, or it just didn't get a lot of usage. You can see the underside there, still pretty dang clean. So I may just end up cleaning these up and throwing them on there, throwing some of the parts on there. One of the things that this came with, because he was intending on doing all this, was it came with new valve springs. He went with the higher rated ones, so these are 130-pound valve springs that he has installed right here. He did this just to see how good of a seal he could get with it. He said it was not very good. So I might just take these off, but it's nice that it came with a set of 130-pound valve springs. Parts right there, parts over there, parts down here. Here's another one of the original cylinder heads. Again, you can see how fairly clean that is. I mean, there's almost nothing in there to speak of for buildup. And I would think that anything that's really left in here is just from it sitting. We have the intake plate for the supercharger right here. Over here is the block. I have to get a stand to get it up, so it's just kind of gently sat on here for now. I have a stand coming in. It got lost. They shipped it back. But here's what I'm talking about. Look at that piston head. Almost nothing on the top of that, and you could still see like the machining lines on the edge of the piston head. And I know it's going to be hard to see, but I mean, look at how shiny that cylinder wall is. You can still see it's, I mean, you're not going to be able to see it on camera, but you can still see the cross hatching on the walls. So this is all really, really nice. it looks like it's the low miles. He already put the ARP head studs in here, which is nice. That's something I would have done. I took the timing cover off because it was just kind of loosely placed on there. Somebody did a really poor job of painting this thing. They just went to town on it and covered up everything, seal surfaces, extra bits. So still a little bit of concern there because that could be covering up some damage that I'm not aware of. Again, I won't know until I dig into this block. But the timing setup looks very nice and clean. Almost no excess tension. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. I'll pull the oil pan off once I get an engine stand. And I've got all of this stuff right here. So this is all the lifter retainers, the extra stuff like the alternator. I've got the big crank pulley right here. Belt tensioners, basically anything else that came with it. Up here I have a part that I probably won't use, but it's nice to have. The supercharger that came off the original one. Turns nicely, no resistance, no nothing, just dusty. And another nice thing, since he was planning on redoing it, he had a bunch of gaskets that he purchased for this thing and extra bits. So I've got oil pan gasket, I've got the intake gasket, I've got extra exhaust gaskets, I've got the timing cover gasket, I've got water pump gaskets. I literally, every gasket I probably will need for this vehicle is in this box. And that's pretty nice. And then right here we have what I'm probably going to use for this. He found one of the original Series 2 ones. That's just the standard intake. And I'll be able to basically use this for the setup that I'm going for. I'll have it just run the turbo power, so I don't have to do the weird mod to that supercharger over there where they'll basically gut the whole thing and put a plate on it in order to just turn it into a big intake. I can do that with this, and it's already made for it. It looks nicer. Add to that, one of the other nice things about this purchase was it came with the entire wiring harness and the computer. Now that's really, really useful to me because having to create your own wiring harness is kind of a difficult thing to do. And it also came with the exhaust, and somewhere around here is the fuel lines as well. But that's a basic overview of all the stuff I got out of this purchase, which I think was a dang good deal for as low miles as this looks to be. I'll know more once I take apart the bottom end of the motor. I'll get to see if I see any discoloration, if maybe it heated up, if maybe it had a rod knock or something like that, but it doesn't look like it. The only issue that there was on it, which he said is the reason why this engine is so low miles, is, I don't know if you can see it, but this is all ground up pretty good. What had happened was the flywheel had cracked at one point, and I don't know if you've seen the flywheels for these, but they are very, very thin. And it had cracked and was rubbing against this and bumping against the pieces down here. So this whole plate cover right here might need to be replaced, but they thought the engine was knocking and they were just going to replace it in its entirety. So they pulled this engine. Somebody saw it, they said, I mean, I could use the parts off of it. They grabbed the motor and boom, they ended up with a really nice engine that just had an issue with the flywheel. So, good things to look forward to here. Once I get this up on the stand, I'm going to start building it. And building it's going to be upgrading almost everything. I don't think I need to work on the bottom end. These pistons and rods should be able to hold up to somewhere up to 500 horsepower, and I'm not planning on exceeding that. I will have to do a double chain timing up front, which means I might have to replace the cover anyway. But that's just something to think about. I know I will need to do it because you do need better timing, and especially if I'm going to do a custom crank or custom cam, which I probably will have to do just to get the profiles right for air and exhaust. But anyway, thanks for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.